In a small Georgia church, a widow sought comfort in the one man she should have stayed away from her cousin. But when their secret love was discovered, her own father, the town's beloved pastor, committed an unholy act in the name of God. What he buried beneath the altar was more than sin. It was murder. In a quiet Georgia town, faith turned fatal. And beneath the altar, a poison was waiting. In a quiet corner of rural Georgia stood a small wooden church that had endured decades of storms, prayers, and whispered secrets. Its pastor, Amos McClain, was revered for his strict adherence to Scripture. People saw him as a gatekeeper of righteousness. He led the congregation with stern love, preaching the old ways without compromise. Within this devout community lived Ruth, Amos's only daughter. She was a widow in her 30s, having lost her husband to a car accident 2 years earlier. Since his death, Ruth had taken to isolation, finding her comfort in Scripture and family. But behind closed doors, Ruth found solace in someone forbidden, her cousin Samuel. Samuel was more than family. He was also a deacon at the church, trusted by Pastor Amos and loved by the community. He often visited Ruth under the pretense of prayer or support, but over time their meetings turned secretive. The grief that first drew them together soon transformed into something dangerous. They began to meet late at night, always careful, always quiet, but not quite enough. The relationship between Ruth and Samuel was not just frowned upon. It was a direct violation of everything the church stood for. To the outside world, they were family. But to each other, they had become something darker. And though they believed no one knew, eyes were always watching. Especially the eyes of Pastor Amos. Pastor Amos had spent his life shielding his family from shame. His sermons warned against moral decay, always echoing one truth: sin must be purged. When he discovered the nature of Ruth and Samuel's relationship, he did not confront them. He prayed. He fasted. He turned to the book of Leviticus. Passages were clear in his mind. He read them over and over, believing divine judgment had been placed in his hands. The punishment for impurity among kin was death. Amos believed he wasn't killing a man. He was cleansing a bloodline. One evening during a church gathering, Samuel suddenly collapsed. His face drained of color, and he fell to the ground gasping. A crowd rushed to his side, but it was too late. The coroner ruled it a heart attack. There was no sign of foul play, no bruises, no needle marks, no wounds. The church mourned. Pastor Amos delivered the eulogy with stoic grace. Ruth wept quietly, but something didn't feel right. The night after the funeral, Amos burned Samuel's belongings. No one questioned it, not even Ruth, though her unease grew. Her father's calm presence seemed unnatural, like someone who had already made peace with the death. Ruth searched for answers in Samuel's remaining possessions. That's when she found the letter. Hidden beneath a drawer in Samuel's desk was a letter addressed to Ruth. Its handwriting was careful, its message unsettling. It began with a confession, not of guilt, but of fear. Samuel wrote that he believed someone had discovered their bond. He feared not the townspeople, but Pastor Amos. He referenced a disturbing conversation overheard at the church Amos, quoting Leviticus 18 and 20. The very scriptures condemning their relationship. Folded inside the letter was a single page torn. From an old Bible, the verses were underlined in red ink. If a man lies with his relative by blood, they shall be cut off in the sight of their people. Ruth stared at it in disbelief. The letter's final lines hinted at a secret passage. Beneath the church's altar, a place her father often visited alone, Ruth began to unravel. The man who raised her, who preached forgiveness, had possibly killed Samuel in the name of purity, but she had no proof. The death certificate said heart attack. The town trusted Amos more than anyone. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was buried literally and spiritually beneath the altar. Ruth didn't know was that someone else had noticed the inconsistencies in Samuel's death. A young investigative journalist named Leah had been covering corruption in southern churches for years. When she heard whispers about a sudden death, an old-school pastor, and a hidden affair, she drove to Georgia with a camera, a notebook. and a curiosity that would uncover far more than she expected. Leah arrived as an outsider, but she blended in quickly. She posed as a visiting believer, sitting quietly through sermons, watching every move Amos made. She visited the graveyard. She spoke to members of the congregation. Most spoke fondly of Samuel, describing him as healthy and strong-eyed, someone who died so suddenly of natural causes. It was Ruth who eventually came forward. Nervously, discreetly, she shared the letter with Leah, the journalist. Experienced in religious scandals, recognized its weight immediately. Together, they returned to the church one night and searched the area beneath the altar. A hidden panel led to a cramped, musty space filled with old records, broken pews, and something chilling: a wooden box labeled cleansing tools. Inside were empty vials, handwritten scripture pages soaked in what looked like oil, a small bottle containing residue later confirmed to be digitally supplant-based poison that mimics heart failure. With this evidence, Leah began documenting everything. She uncovered Amos's past sermons that subtly referenced righteous punishment. She found other signs altered church records, a mysterious drop in congregants over the years, and anonymous letters mailed to Amos warning him to stop acting. As God, Leah brought her findings to local authorities, but Amos had already sensed the walls closing in. Before police could act, he vanished. His car was found abandoned near the state line. No note, no trail. Just his Bible left open to the story of Lot, and his daughters a story of forbidden acts. Divine wrath and exile. In the aftermath, the town split in belief. Some refused to believe Amos was capable of murder. Others whispered that Ruth was, to blame that she had seduced Samuel into sin. The church closed for months. Ruth, devastated but determined, held a press conference and publicly confessed her relationship with Samuel. She begged for understanding, not for herself, but for him. He didn't deserve to die. The investigation concluded with enough evidence to confirm Amos's guilt in Samuel's death, but not enough to charge anyone else. He remained missing. Leah published her full story under the title The Forbidden Altar, drawing national attention. Her documentary sparked conversations about religious extremism, biblical misinterpretation, the dangers of unchecked spiritual authority. The most haunting part of her work came not from the crime, but from a final entry in Amos's personal journal, later found buried in the church garden. It read, "What is sin when blood calls to blood? If a father cannot cleanse his house, who will? God does not speak softly anymore." The case remains closed, but the questions it raised still echo. Where is the line between faith and fanaticism? And what happens when that line is crossed in the name of purity? Ruth moved away. Leah won awards. The church reopened under new leadership. But the altar remains, the same floorboards, the same pulpit, the same shadows. It's now a monument. Two secrets, too dark for the light. And somewhere, in the silence of Georgia woods, a fugitive pastor may still be praying not for forgiveness, but for righteousness.